Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest Quarterly Market Performance and Planning Forum, or MPPF. I'm joined today by our presenters, Guillermo Bautista from our Market Analysis and Forecasting Group, Amber Motley from our Short-Term Forecasting Group, Trang Vo from our Strategic Initiative Management Group, and Brad Cooper from our Policy Group. Also, as most are familiar, we also encourage you to sign up for our Energy Matters newsletter if you aren't already. In addition, this call, as most of our calls and webinars, are recorded for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to recordings after the meeting. These recordings will be publicly available on the ISO webpage for a limited time following the meeting. And of course, we request that the recordings and any related transcriptions please not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And as most hopefully know by now, we hold these quarterly MPPF sessions to discuss market performance updates, as well as updates on our initiatives and release planning efforts here at the ISO. And we'll be pausing for questions throughout after each section. We do prefer verbal questions, but if we see anything in the chat, we'll be sure to verbalize those as well. And to enter the queue to ask a question verbally, you would press the raise hand virtual icon that you should see on the WebEx, unless you dialed in by phone separately, in which case you would push the #2 button to enter the queue, and we'll be sure to call on the callers in the order in which they enter the queue. And with that, before I hand over to Guillermo, today's agenda, as mentioned, we'll start off with the market performance update provided by Guillermo and Amber, and then followed by the release update provided by Trang. And then finally, we'll conclude with the policy update provided by Brad Cooper. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Guillermo.
Thank you, Jimmy, for the introduction. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Guillermo.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Before we go into the specifics, let me just give you the landscape of the discussion this morning. We have a couple of updates related to the congestion revenue rights, the CAISO overall cost, and also batteries. And then we have the standard deck that covers a different set of metrics across the market. And this is standard. I don't expect that we are going to spend too much time on that. It's for your reference. If you have any questions, we will be able to answer that. And after that, we would move to the forecasting side. So overall, I expect that this is going to be a very quick update. We don't have too many exciting things to discuss, at least for the last 2-3 months. I think after all the excitement of the summer, the last few months have been very quiet, and that's reflective of the lack of interesting material to discuss today. And that being said, we just want to go through the standard updates of a few metrics that we always keep track on. And with that, let me start with the congestion revenue rights update. Let's go to the next slide, please. These are very standard metrics that we have been updating every MPPF, and this is going to continue to be the case. This first one is effectively just giving you the relative feeling of the size of the transactions in the CRR space. And we have different metrics accounting for what is the overall notional value of the CRRs before any pro rata, how much we estimated the deficit, how much we have to end up with the adjustments for the CRRs, how much we may be tracking for surplus, because now we track this separate from the deficit, and the overall value that is going to go to measure demand, that is the surplus plus the option revenues. And naturally, this tends to be higher during the summer months when we face tighter conditions, more congestion, and as we go into the end of the year, this trend starts to come down. And naturally, it means that there is less congestion in the system. and that is in part because of the load levels in the system. We may not be able to fully utilize all the transmission constraints, so there is a space to flow and there is less exposure to congestion. Next slide, please. This one is a counterfactual analysis that we have been doing since we implemented the pro rata funding, and this just compares what would have been the funding with and without the pro rata approach that we had. And the portion in green would be the settlements that we have with no pro rata. Basically, we bear all the cost of the revenue inadequacy. But once we have the pro rata funding, we break even, right? And the delta or the difference between the green and the blue bars stands for the effect of having the pro rata funding in place. And naturally, since we implemented the pro rata funding, that is going to be a positive value, because that is going to first bring the revenue neutrality, and then any surplus coming from the settlements is going to be collected separately. And all this together goes to measure demand. So effectively, one way to see the effect of the pro rata funding is to see the net value or the net dollar settlement that goes to measure demand. And you can see that it's consistently quite a difference between the no pro rata funding with the pro rata funding, and that is the expectation. Next slide, please. Okay, I think we have a question. Operator, Tijan, I think we have one question.
Can you hear me, Guillermo? This is Seth with DC Energy.
Yes, Seth. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Cool. Just have a question about the green versus blue bars for July and August. So those are pretty big differences that shifted due to the pro rata funding. And my question is, what is causing the mismatch between the CR model and the day-ahead model that's causing that shortfall, that's being assessed to the CR holders? Do you know the cause of that? I'm just asking, have you studied that or looked into that?
Yes, and unfortunately I don't have that in my hands, but I could refer you to where we have posted information. And sorry, we discussed that back in the last MPPF or so I was not with the details fresh to discuss. But yes, and it could be a variety of reasons, and I think the best reference for you to check exactly what happened for July and August is to check the monthly performance report, not the summer reports that we posted specifically for the summer, but the standard monthly reports. We have a section regarding CRRs, and in that section we put some specific details of what constraint and what condition drove the surplus and the deficit for each of the months. The reason we have the rates and we have outages and so on. So, but specific to July and August, I would refer you to those details. Okay.
Is the CAISO looking into that in terms of it being an issue with possibly trying to converge the models so that the shortfall isn't as acute? Is there any effort going on inside the ISO that's looking at improving?
That is an ongoing assessment that we do, Seth, and we always check what was the reason for that and see what are the conditions that put us in that condition. I think there are elements about timing, for instance, the nature of the business, right? As long as there are outages that were not in the model and now they are in the day-ahead market, there is so much we can do. So I don't want to overpromise, but just to the open answer that in some cases, if it's about processes, improvements in how we manage conditions, that is something that we can still improve. There will be a set of conditions that are mostly driven by temporal conditions that is going to be the nature of the business unless we change the whole paradigm of the timing of the auctions and so on. So in the short term, I don't see that to be something that we can tackle without meaningful or major changes to the framework of the market.
Okay, and one more thing, I don't presume to know the causes. I'll have to look at your report. But at one point, there had been some discussion on the shift factor cutoff in the ISM, potentially, particularly on the trading hubs and load aggregation points, and that being a particular source of CR underfunding. Is that something that the CAISO is still considering doing, eliminating the shift factor cutoff at the trading hubs and laps in the ISM?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that item. Yes, we discussed what it's almost, I think it's going to be almost 2 years we discussed this. And we have actually done some simulations and the process of writing the white paper to be posted. And yes, we are still targeting to move forward with that. I can see that in terms of priority, that was put a little bit on the side given all the summer conditions that we experienced, not just this 2021, but the 2020. And that was a matter of priorities, right? And now that we have passed that, we are ready to go into this small change. It's a tariff change. That is the reason we have to do a more formal process. But we are ready for that. We have completed some simulations. We have a proposal, and we are finalizing the white paper that we can post. So I would say that early in January, we'll be able to start the discussion to move forward with the implementation of that. And just to give you some reference to the rest of the party, is that we are not going to eliminate this across the board. The expectation is to be more surgical for the most meaningful locations, such as trading hubs and D-labs, given the threshold of 2% could be quite a lot of megawatts when we're talking about injections of D-labs of 10,000 megawatts, right? So it's going to be surgical. It's going to be very targeted to D-labs and trading hubs, and it's not going to be applicable to all locations. Effectively, we are not expecting to eliminate the threshold, but effectively just be surgical with some specific locations.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Guillermo. I look forward to seeing the white paper. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Let's move on, please, to the next slide. This is the standard metric that we track for the CRS efficiency. This compares the relative difference between the money collected by selling CRRs in the auction process versus the money that is paid to the same CRRs that were purchased through the auction. And the percentage is just the relative difference between the two. And this value naturally is going to be oscillating from month to month, given that it's very dynamic on the system conditions. And in the last few months, it has been hovering in the range of anywhere between 50% to about 90%. And it varies by month. It depends on the level of congestion. There are some months that are better than others, at least for the month of October that is the most recent month that we calculated, is in the neighborhood of 75%. And one caveat I want to state here is that these are based on settlement data and therefore is subject to change. And you just need to take this with some caution, because these numbers may eventually change as we rerun for older months and we get the more definite values for this. I wouldn't expect they are going to change dramatically, but there could be some small variations once we do a true-up, once we have more definite settlements data. Next slide, please. Okay. There is a series of metrics related to the market cost, and that was originated by the concerns about how expensive it was to have the summer conditions and how much it cost in terms of the overall CAISO settlements cost. And we start putting this metric as part of the summer reports, and even prior to that. I don't expect to go through each single of those variations. It's there for your reference. And let me just cover the first two, and then we can jump forward to the next topic. Next slide, please. I think this is very standard, and we have indicated that we're capturing all the costs related to the operation of our markets, including the costs settled in the day ahead, the real time, either for energy or ancillary services, the uplift costs that we have, such as big cost recovery, even the GMC. Next slide, please. And this is the overall trend. And you can see that in the summer months, when we have higher levels of load, settling typically at higher prices, the expectation is that the overall cost is going to be higher, and that is a consistent trend that we see. How high depends really how tight the summer may be. In the Q3, we were in the relative ballpark of previous years, and you can compare 2018, for instance, to 2020, and they are comparable. Q4 is partial. It's covered through October, and obviously that is going to be a relatively lower value. And these numbers also, please keep in mind that these are preliminary because it's based on settlement data. When we have more definite settlement data, these numbers are going to change, not dramatically, but to some extent. And the trend here is expected that even though Q4 is partial, we are going to expect that these costs are going to be relatively smaller than what we experienced in the summer of 2021. Given the fact that we have lower prices, lower levels of demand to settle, and the costs are going to follow that trend. Let's skip the next few slides and go to the next topic, please. Can you forward 3-4 more slides? One more. Well, maybe there is something here. Sorry, let me just spend a minute here. And this is a daily granularity just to give you a sense of the trends over time for this same cost. And the interesting part is that you can see that the daily costs tend to increase as we approach the summer conditions. Again, higher loads settle at higher prices. The interesting part here, when you see basically the full year, is what really happened on February, when we have not exactly the days with high loads and high prices, but you may recall that on February we have these extreme gas prices. In some cases, we exceeded the $100 per MMBTU, when typically our gas prices are in the range of, I don't know, $3 to $6 per MMBTU. You can see that the spike is specific to these weather cold conditions on mid-February. And after that, the trend just is steady with higher costs on a daily basis as we go deep into the summer. Next slide, please. The last specific topic I would like to cover for the market side is regarding the performance of the batteries. There has been a lot of interest how batteries are performing in our market. We have had different discussions either through the specific assessments of the summer conditions or specific topics on the batteries in the recent 2-3 months. And this is just an update just to see how the trend looks when we have all the months through November. And as you may recall, through 2021, we have seen a very fast increase in the penetration of battery resources in the CAISO system. And it's just fascinating to see at the speed at which we have gotten more storage resources in the system. The next few slides cover the day ahead and the real time, and the two key metrics that we track are the state of charge, how much energy is in the battery, and also the dispatches of those batteries in either the day ahead or the real-time market. And we captured the last 6 months covering the performance of these batteries. And this is quite revealing. You can see first the level of penetration, right? When we are in the month of June, for instance, the maximum storage capacity that we have in the day-ahead market was in the range of 2,500 megawatt-hours. As we reach the August time frame or even the September time frame, that basically hit the 6,000 megawatt-hours. And that is a very steep increase on the storage capacity. The second relevant point here is the outlet trend, how these resources are storing energy through the day. Naturally, we would expect that they are going to be charging all its energy to be able to be ready for deployment in the evening and night hours. And you can see that is, relatively speaking, a good trend to see in these months, specifically in August and September. You can see that the state of charge reached the maximum levels as early as hour ending 15, 16, 17. And that is just on time to be fully available for discharge for meeting the peaks in the night, either the gross or the net load peak. And that is a very good trend to see. If we go to the next slide, please. This is effectively the real time. The picture is not that different, and the volume, the levels are going to be relatively similar. The trend may be slightly different in terms of the hour of the day or of the spread of charging and discharging, because these are more on dynamic conditions in the real time. But in general, you can still observe a similar trend to what we have in the day-ahead market. Next slide, please. And this is the dispatch, effectively through the months when and how the batteries have been charged and discharged. You can see as we get out of the summer conditions, there is a very nice evolution of the trend. You can see September and November, for instance, is quite marked how it follows the dark curve. When we have all the low prices, the middle of the day conditions of oversupply, you can see that is when the batteries are going to be charging, because that is the ideal time for charging. And as we go into the evening ramp and the night peak, they start to discharge. And that is the expected trend of charging and discharging of batteries. Next slide, please. And this is the one for the real time. It follows quite the same trend, charging in the middle of the day and discharging in the evening peak time. And I think as November shows, we have quite a lot of battery capacity. We have been able to dispatch batteries over 1,250 megawatts, and that's a significant amount that help us to meet the peak conditions of the system. The next slide, please. It's also interesting to see that batteries are also providing ancillary services, and this is a breakdown by the type of ancillary service, either regulation or operating reserves. The gross of that is going to be focused on the regulation, and that is a very natural match, given the capabilities of the storage resources to follow that fine signal. And regulation seems to be a very natural product to be scheduled for. And we can see that the trends are consistent through the months. They follow certain trends through the day as well. And I think overall it's a good trend to see how the batteries are performing in the system. There were other metrics that we included in the summer report. We are just trying to keep the most important ones. But as more batteries get integrated into the system, this is going to be a specific area that we will continue to analyze and check how it's performing through the system. These are really the three main topics I wanted to cover. The next section, that is the market update, covers the standard metric that we have, prices, BCR, exceptional dispatches, price corrections. I don't expect to go through this. These are for your reference. If you have any questions, though, I think we can entertain those now before we move into the next section of forecasting. And I see we have a question from Dan. Tijan, can we open up the line for Dan, please?
Hi, Guillermo. Thanks. This is Dan from Customized Energy Solutions. So two quick questions on some of the metrics. One, when Dr. Harvey yesterday in the EIM Resource Efficiency Analysis meeting mentioned some things about the flexible ramping product clearing prices and impacts that may have on EIM transfers, other aspects of the market. And that just made me curious whether you may be able to start doing some more granular reporting on the FRP prices. I think most of what's in the MPPF and then looking at the monthly performance reports and even DMM's quarterly reports don't tend to drill down on anything like a box and whiskers plot of kind of the range of clearing prices that we're seeing for FRP, either for the CAISO market or for the EIM areas. And I think that might be useful information to talk about at a high level, even though it's all out there in OASIS. It's just not as easy to look at.
Yeah, point taken. Then I think there are some efforts we are doing to further assess the performance of the FRP. We already have a couple of enhancements that we implemented earlier in the year, and we're still pending the implementation of the big piece, that is the FRP deliverability. But point taken, I think we can do further analysis and bring more details into the discussions for how FRP is performing. So I will take that for the next round and make sure that we cover that specific topic.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the other one is just something I've asked about in the previous MPPFs and the summer market performance meetings, and that's just to get more discussion around the performance of the Order 831 changes that went into place back in June. And DMM reported on that a little bit in their second quarter report and just kind of showed the levels of the maximum import bid price that was calculated, where that stacked up against like the day-ahead Palo Index and real-time Palo Index. But we haven't really had any discussion of whether the changes have resulted in the performance that was looked for in terms of increasing intertie market liquidity or intertie market offers during tight system conditions when the West is sort of competing for any additional supply, either in the bilateral market or at CAISO's intertie market. So I'm not sure what's going to get discussed in the DMM Q3 report, but I'm just curious if that's an area that CAISO has talked about looking into in time to consider whether there are any changes that need to be made to improve the performance of that aspect of the market before summer of 2022.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Dan. I think I mentioned that before. Typically, we wait for a little bit for the market to settle and bring the information to the participants. We have been assessing individually, internally, how the implementation has been working. And one of the interesting parts with 831 is that it's not across the board every single day, right? There has to be some right conditions to be able to get meaningful insights of how 831 is performing. If you have typical prices during the winter months, for instance, there will be very little to gain of how effectively 831 is performing. So we need to potentially be very, very targeted as to what days would be useful to assess when these conditions are naturally triggered. And I think I don't want to overstate whether this winter February is going to be a good test condition to see how 831 is going to be performing. But regardless, I think once we collect a few more data points, we would be able to bring a specific analysis of so far how 831 has been performing since implementation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we put into place something that is meant to help during the tightest system condition days, but then if you don't experience those, as we had a pretty mild late summer this year, you just don't have the test of the emergency system, so to speak. I guess I would encourage just a kind of final thought is maybe to have some further discussion with market participants who are impacted by this to discuss just how easy or difficult it was to work with the framework that's in place for Order 831 and how they experienced it relative to offering supply to the CAISO versus offering supply to the bilateral market on some of those tight days where it was in play, just to see if it's likely to get the intended results if we do have a summer of 2022 that looks more like summer of 2020. But I'll stop there. Those are just the thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. That's good feedback, Dan. I appreciate it. Okay, Tijan, I think we have 2 more people in line. Can we open up the line for Kelly?
Hi, Guillermo. It's Caliwells with WPTF. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Kelly, we can hear you.
Hi. I was just curious. I know the storage default energy bids haven't been in the market for much time. So I was just curious if you guys have had any opportunity to evaluate the performance in the market, or if you have any plans maybe in the next MPPF to include some slides on how the storage DEBs are performing.
Yes, Kelly, and I think I could reduce the explanation I gave to Dan that we wait for a little bit of time to see how things are performing. We start analyzing and validating how it's working since day one, and that is part of our internal processes. But to bring this forward for a public discussion, we typically wait a little bit more to have meaningful data to show. So my expectation is that it was just last month that it was implemented. It was not ripe for discussion in today's MPPF, but I think for the next one, it should be good enough to have a good sample of data to have some discussion and analysis on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was just kind of hoping to flag that as a topic for the next MPPF. I understand that you haven't had much time to evaluate it for this one, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other hands. Dijan, can we see if there is any other question on the phone before we move to the next topic?
I'm not showing any other hands raised at this time.
Okay. Can we move forward to the subsequent topic that is going to be, I don't know, a slide? Let me see. It should be
around 44.
Yeah. One before. Okay. I will pass it to Amber now to cover this topic. Amber?
Good morning, everybody. I hope all is well. We added one slide to the typical slides from the forecasting accuracy numbers that we thought it was important to communicate out to the MPPF, as well as an additional market notice that will be coming. When doing some evaluations on the OASIS wind and solar report, specifically the actuals for wind and solar, it was identified that there were some resources missing within the formulation of the summed actual values for wind and solar resources. So when doing a comparison of the forecasted megawatts to the actual megawatts across the different trading hubs, you would see a discrepancy of up to 25% deviation. The issue was fixed in the afternoon on 11/29/2021 going forward. And right now we're looking at the opportunity to backfill some of the previous data that's there. That communication of what backfill is and when the backfill is completed will be communicated out to the participants via a market notice. But did want to let the MPPF know about this as well. The error numbers that are within the MPPF have been correct, and this was just an OASIS actual reporting component. All right, next slide. All right, just tracking through error, many things are very standard. What we've actually seen that the error in 2021 for October and November in the day-ahead load forecast, and then also on the next slide, the peak load forecasts are running below the 2019 and 2020 typical averages. So overall in the year 2021, accuracies did perform better than 2020. 2020 was very impacted from COVID, as we all remember. Next slide. And these are the peak accuracies, the same trends that you see on the day-ahead side of things. Next slide. And I'm going to pull them up because if you guys have any questions on the slides, always feel free to pause and go through. These are the wind forecast values that you're seeing in the performance for day-ahead. Wind performance in 2021 is doing very in line for November of 2020, but less than 2019. And you have seen a steadily, for October, looking at October, you've seen a steady decrease in overall accuracy, which is an improvement from the 2019 year. Next slide. Solar accuracy, we did see a little bit of an uptick compared to 2020 and 2021 for solar accuracy day ahead. We also had a very big rain system move through during October, and we've had a lot of increased fog throughout the Central Valley in the last couple of months, more than we've seen since about 2017, 2018 here. And that's impacting the day-ahead solar forecast slightly, but you still see improvements of the forecast for the 2019 year. Next slide. And we'll go quickly over the two real-time pieces. So the next two pieces are the real-time performance of the renewable resources. This is specifically looking at the RTD accuracy. We see that it's very in line for the last few months to our 2020 results and improved from 2019. We still are running the persistent methodology within the RTD and have seen accuracy numbers, right now slightly under 1%. Next slide. Same trend here, 2019 and seen a significant amount of improvement in 2020 and 2021. 2020 and 2021 are running really in line with each other. Did see, just very similarly in October, a little bit of an uptick in 2021, really driven by some of the fog conditions and the early rain that we've seen in California. And with that, I'll just get into a couple slides on the EIM entities. If you could skip forward to 53. Perfect. One of the things that we're working on, and I'll focus on the EIM entities right now, is some of our EIM entities have a higher penetration of behind-the-meter solar, very similar to the CAISO area. CAISO implemented behind-the-meter solar forecasting within our demand forecast a few years ago. And now with the increased penetrations within the EIM footprint, we are working to incorporate behind-the-meter solar for those that have higher penetration. One of them that got behind-the-meter solar forecasting is LADWP, which you can see on the top right of this graph. That is really helping them this season as we get into the more cloud cover October and November time overall within their T60 forecast accuracy. And that's something that we will see within the EIM T60 forecast as the behind-the-meter solar and behind-the-meter actual forecast and actual information is incorporated within their load model as well. And those are all the key components that I had on the forecasting side and some of the things that we are working on. Any questions?
Thanks a lot, Amber. Very informative and efficient as always. I don't see any questions, Tegan, but maybe give folks a few more seconds before we move on to the next section. All right, well, with that, I think I see Trang in the queue. So thank you, Trang, for joining us now as we move to the next section. Whenever you are ready. Oh, I guess we move to the right portion of the slides. Sorry about that, folks. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you, Jimmy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks, Trang.
Okay. And I also have Cindy from Customer Readiness and Training that is on and would like the opportunity to give an update on this. So, Cindy, can you raise your hand or unmute yourself?
Thanks, Trang. Tegan, if you can see Cynthia Hinman's name in the attendee list and promote her to panelist, please. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you. This is Cynthia Hinman from the Customer Readiness Group. And good morning. I'm not sure if you just heard me. This is Cynthia Hinman from the Customer Readiness Group. I just wanted to share with you that we have a number of new computer-based trainings that I think are very important and helpful. So I wanted to let you know about them now and encourage you to go to the Customer Readiness Learning Center on the ISO website and take a look at them. We have new computer-based training covering an overview of resource adequacy, which goes through the process, the entire RA process. The storage resources computer-based training, which talks about hybrid resources, co-located resources. It's a really great fundamental look at our storage resource models, and also a new congestion revenue rights computer-based training. And of course, we have 30 or 40 other computer-based trainings that I encourage you to look at if you have questions or want to learn more about any of these topics. That's really all I had for right now. If you have any questions about training, computer-based training, I'm available for that.
All right. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you.
As always, very useful information and very valuable content that is available on the Learning Center. So we can move to the next slide. All right. So per usual, we'll start with our release plan summary updates for 2021 and then 2022. For the independent 2021 efforts, we have variable O&M cost review on track for activation January 1st. So we'll cover some additional information there when we get there. For hybrid resources phase 2A, that remains with an activation plan for next week. And for OSI, our set up 2000 enhancements, we have a couple of items left there for this year and a few that are moved to next year, and we can take a look at those when we get to that section. And that will wrap up our release plan implementations for 2021. So we can move on to the next slide. All right. So you'll see a full list of implementations for 2022. As usual, we'll have our spring 2022 EIM implementation spread across March and April. And in addition to our EIM onboarding, we have EIM enhancements phase 2 for the ETSR UI and the shared ramping constraint. And that is, again, to enhance the features for EIM that will be taken advantage of by the existing EIMs as well as our onboarding entities. For spring 2022, we have day-ahead nodal pricing model phase 2, and that is coming in February. We also, for May 1st, have our hybrid resources phase 2B activation, as well as the target for the short long start definitions activation as well, which was moved from fall 2021. In our next set of independent 2022 items, we don't have individual slides for these yet, and we wanted to, again, just kind of keep our finger on the pulse of these fast approaching implementations. So we have the list that is not changed since our last release user group update last week. We have EIM Resource Efficiency, Evaluation Phase 1, the transmission service and market scheduling priorities phase 1, interconnection process enhancements phase 1, RDRR bidding enhancements, and market parameter changes. So just to reiterate what we've been communicating via the release user group are these initiatives that are set as independent 2022 in this section are plans for implementation prior to the summer of 2022, and we're really scrutinizing and prioritizing the features across these 5 efforts to pull in to implementation prior to summer 2022, anything that will that can significantly improve our operational conditions for next summer. So what you'll see there and the expectation for those independent projects is, again, to be implemented prior to summer. And there will be more information provided on those efforts as we get through the impact assessment and planning activities. For fall 2022, we have a list that is still tentative as well. What you see is FRP improvements, the resource adequacy enhancements phase 2, FERC 2222, and then FERC NOPR, as well as the EIM sub-FCSC implementation, and then the EIM base schedule submission deadline phase 2, which is the timeline change to 40 to 30. And then we've also started introducing the 2023 independent effort for the CRR upgrade, and there is a lot of activity there from the technical side as far as the API implementation and those types of things. So the TUG has more information on CRR, but we have slides to cover that. So I'll go over more details on that as we get into the individual slides. But I would like to open it up here for questions specifically about the 2022 independent items and the fall 2022 efforts. Since we do not have individual slides for that, I want to give folks an opportunity to share any comments or ask any questions. So,
thanks a lot, Sherang. Yeah, we're making good on time, folks, so we'll give you a few seconds to stay on the queue there.
All right. So I don't see any questions, and I'm not hearing any. Jimmy, can you confirm?
I think there is one in the queue. I'll give him, I think it's Alva. I'll give you some time, Alva.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
There you go. Yep.
Great. I just wasn't sure what you were saying there, but are you saying this is the appropriate point to ask about, for example, RDRR bidding enhancements? I mean, one of the issues there is I don't think we actually have a proposal yet for what's going to be happening in terms of whether bids are going to be required to be changed or whether they're going to be automatically changed or what. It's quite a leap from where I understood things to be to having something done by the summer. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more about where things really are on that.
Yeah, that is a really great point. And typically we structure the MPPF where you'll hear the updates from policy first, and then we'll go into the release plan. But nonetheless, this MPPF, we're going a little bit backwards. And but when it comes to our planning, we are following the lead from our policy team and the developments there. So this, from the implementation side, is just a placeholder of what we plan, but it'll continue to go through that the process of the the policy process and activities for us to get more detail. So in the release plan update, I don't have more information for you, but I would advise you to hold that question until the policy updates, and perhaps they'll have more information there.
Okay, it's just
I'll also add, yeah, we did switch around the agenda for this session. Typically, as Trang mentioned, we have the policy update first, but I believe Brad's availability, we just switched on the agenda. So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to shed more light on that, Alva.
Great. I mean, my concern is you may have, it's sort of like, has the plan essentially been put in order for you to say you're going to deliver this by summer? In a sense, it sounds like you would have had to have made a decision, and that hasn't, as far as I know, it hasn't been communicated in that way. So that's just my my concern with it showing up here. And I could be wrong because I may have missed something, some notification that came out that made it clearer what the amount of work that was going to be involved in this was. But we're fairly concerned about it, of course, because we have a fair number of RDRR resources that could be impacted by this initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alvo. That's a really great point, too. And we know that this timeline is aggressive. And so what I can tell you is that, again, as the list here that you see is tentative, pending those planning activities, including on the policy area. And then with our team and with our stakeholders, we'll continue to evaluate and assess what are the critical features that we want to plan to implement pre-summer. That is our target at this point, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it'll be everything that's being proposed and anything there. So I understand your concern, but we're trying to balance, the advance notice, even with the finalization of the scope, I would say. So we're trying to give you an early indication of what our implementation plans are, and balancing that with the uncertain decisions, I guess. Okay. All right. Good. Are there any other questions or comments on specifically 2022 independent or fall 2022, as we don't have individual slides for those yet? All right. So let's move on to the next slide. And then the next one, please. Okay. So for wrapping up 2021, we have variable O&M cost review, and there's no updates here, but just a note for the additional information that was just recently added is that we would have the triennial review, the default AVOM adders scheduled for 2021, but it will not occur this year due to the timing of this effort. And so there's additional information there for you to review, and if there are questions, we're happy to take those back to the team. And we can go on to the next slide where we'll cover the milestones. Or sorry, this is the system impacts, and then here's the milestones. All right, so our next big activity and milestone will be the production activation plan for January 1st, 2022. From here until then, we do have deployment activities as well as data setup that is occurring. So what you see below is the timeline of specifically the master file changes, and that's going to have an associated master file freeze to prepare the data for the activation. So we'll freeze master file starting on December 18th and then open it back up on December 23rd. And during that time, we'll finalize that data for master file and load it into production on December 20th through the 22nd, and that'll add the adders there. And in addition to that, we also have some deployments, mainly the cyber changes for this initiative, and those are also planned in the coming, the week after the next week, so starting the 20th or so. So you'll receive additional customer notices on the cyber implementation to support this, as well as the master file data freeze. But this is tracking well towards getting through the final deployment and activation activities for production. Any questions or comments here? All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, we have hybrid resources, and the specific 2021 implementation is for 2A. So let's go on to the milestone slide with the table. Okay, great. Okay, so we are tracking towards the hybrid resources 2A activation on December 15th. So we're finalizing our production readiness criteria, and we'll make a decision on Tuesday to activate on Wednesday the 15th. While I wanted to specify or call out one thing here is that we did receive the FERC approval for the activation, and we will also be filing an announcement once we do activate that. So per the FERC order. So those that will be coming soon after the activation. Any questions or comments here? Okay, Can I see a question in the queue? Jimmy, could you take that?
Tegan, looks like up there should be unmuted. If you want to go ahead.
Oh, hi, Trang. Good morning. I also put a question in the chat. So you mentioned in the VOM there will be some upcoming cyber deployments. Can you share what are those? Are those expected, or is it a new component? Hi, Tony. That's a good question. So, Jimmy, can we go back to the, there's a few slides previous, and then one more before this. Okay. So for cyber, this is just the initial changes for variable O&M. So we have these cyber changes that will be implemented. So what has gone to production as part of the fall release for variable O&M was the master file changes. And we did have subsequent master file changes in addition that went to production this week to support variable O&M. But for cyber, it is just this the scope that is being deployed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. That's helpful. Yeah. All right. Great. Okay. Any other questions on hybrid? All right. Okay. Not hearing any, so we'll move forward to the next slide for OSI, and we can move on to one more, Jimmy. Okay. So for OSI, what we have remaining, you'll see that our list that is complete of enhancements complete and in production is growing. And what we have remaining for this year and into January is going to be a market enhancement for the blocking and unblocking of ATSRs. And then we also have an AES enhancement that's coming to production in January. You'll see there are 4 items now queued up for 2022 that will continue to build the schedule through, and this will be a standing item in the release user group for any further schedule details on the 4 remaining ones for MRIS, market, unit details UI, and then the 2 CRS changes. We also are we feel like this the OSI enhancements process improvement was very valuable this year, so we'll continue forward with that as a standard for our communicating next year's set of OSI enhancements and reporting that out. So we hope that, publishing a BRS for this set of enhancements as well as communicating regularly in the REC has been helpful to provide that forward plan to our customers, and we look forward to any feedback on any additional information we can provide here to support this. So, any questions on OSI? All right, let's move on.
I do see a hand raised. I'm not sure if you have another question.
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah. I guess you don't have a question, so. Oh, no, yeah. If you're unmuted, go ahead if you have a question. I'm sorry. Wasn't sure if your hand was still raised from the last one.
So, Chen-Yu, we still see your hand raised. Do you have another?
Oh, sorry. No.
Okay.
I do. Well, since I've been called, I do have a question. I do have a question. Can I ask?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So, Trang, from planning purpose, it will be really great that we know whether those 2022 items listed here, whether those going to be done in first quarter, second quarter, or third quarter.
I don't know if you have the information now to share, or we can talk offline as well.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and I should have led with this, but at the last RUG last Tuesday, we did propose or communicate a tentative schedule for the RUG with to bring up the discussion about canceling next week's RUG. We are going to keep the RUG on the 14th, so look forward to that, and we will cancel the one on the 28th and then resume the RUG on January 11th. So next week we'll have the RUG and we'll hope to provide more information. But as far as the question that you had about when to expect this from a planning purpose, it would be Q2 of 2022 for those independent items in the release plan summary to be implemented. So again, the main purpose of those is to benefit us for the summer, and so we're pulling into that late spring or pre-summer release, any of those items that will benefit us and prioritize those features that will benefit us for the summer. And so we definitely want to get them in by Q2. Okay,
sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so let's move on to the next slide after this one too. All right. So for our EIM integration for Vista BPA, Tacoma, and Tucson, what you'll see here is that we did finish our market simulation for Vista BPA and Tacoma that ended at the end of November, and we successfully transitioned into the parallel operations for those three onboarding EIM entities. So our focus there is, again, to meet the readiness criteria in parallel operations and then file for that readiness certification by February 1st for the activation on March 2nd. Also, Tucson is, electric power is in market simulation at this time, so we're able to kick that off, and that entity continues through the market simulation exercises and scenarios in the map stage environment. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide, and then I can stop for questions after that. Let's go one more. Okay, so related to our EIM entities, we also have the enhancements phase 2, and what you'll see here is that we did have the ITC changes of EIM enhancements phase 2 implemented on December 2nd. And that includes the CMRI changes as well. For ETSR UI and shared ranking constraint, we have those planned to activate by April 1st, although for the ETSR UI, we're currently tracking towards an earlier activation of those changes. So I think that is all we have for EIM. Does anybody have any comments or questions? I see one question in the queue. Jimmy, can you take that?
Yeah, thanks, Trang. I think it's unmuted. Alan, I see you in the queue. I'm not sure if you're speaking. Maybe you have to unmute your phone on your end.
Alan, please go ahead.
We can't hear you, Alan. I see you're unmuted on the WebEx, so I'm not sure. Again, your phone might be muted. Or maybe you want to type your question because we don't hear any audio from you, Alan. All right, I guess we can try to move on and let Alan type his question because, yeah, we're not hearing from you, Alan. Sorry about that if you did raise your hand.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So let's move on and then we'll come back to Alan. So yeah, let's go into our spring 2022 release. All right, so can we go back one slide? Okay.
So as part of the settlement user group, we have been communicating a February release that includes CO2P WAPA changes, as well as changes for the JOU pilot, and then finally the day-ahead node pricing model phase 2. So again, what this is it's just following the NERC filing that was made for the implementation of phase 1, and phase 2 will extend this service to support the ancillary service bids. So what we are working with PacifiCorp on the testing of this, and so there is no market simulation that is applicable for this, but we'll work directly with PacifiCorp on this and any testing that they would need to do. And our production activation is set for February 16th, and that'll be noticed via the settlements deployment for February. All right, so let's move on to the next slide, and then I'll stop at the end of the spring section for any questions. Okay, so we can go on one more. And then one more, Jimmy, thank you. Sorry, let's go to the table, so it's going to be the next one. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so for hybrid resources 2B, you'll see this is a draft schedule now, and before these are all TBDs, and what we've added is our timeline for the other deliverables for the structured scenarios, the BPMs, external training, and market simulation. So you'll see that for draft guides, we are currently assessing those, and then we'll provide a schedule. But what is new here is the structured scenarios plan to be published February 2nd, and then BPMs by February 14th, and then external training by February 15th to support a market simulation in the month of March to finish a month prior to the production activation plan for May 1st. So we've already gotten feedback on testing for this, and we continue to look for any feedback or requests that market participants have on the upcoming market sim here, because the BRS has been published for some time with the fall release for phase 2A, and now is a good time to start thinking about what market participants want to see in the market simulation and propose scenarios, so that we can take that back to the team and include those as possible into our structured scenarios as well. Okay, so let's go one more to the next project, milestone slide. Yes, and can we go to the table? Okay, for short long start definitions, our board, our presentation to the board is planned for 2022, and based on that board presentation, then we will determine the additional deliverables for tariffs, BPMs, external training, market simulation window for production activation May 1st. So this is just a target at this point, and more will be to come after the board meeting. And but at this point, for May 1st activation, we can plan tentatively a market simulation in the month of March as well. But we will confirm that, but just I think that the expectation would be that this would align very well with hybrid resources 2B. So with that, I'm going to stop and kind of address questions in the chat first, and then we'll go to the raised hands. So we have a question about a revision of a revised BRS coming for hybrid resources 2B. At this point, there is not any BRS revision for 2B that we have in the queue. So I hope that answers that question. But please do continue in the chat if there's more clarification needed for that. And then I see Alva's hand is raised. Jimmy, could we unmute Alva?
Yes, go ahead, Alva.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trey. And actually, this is essentially a repeat of the previous question in the chat. So your slides here on hybrid are really great. They're very rich. And those 3 slides of bullets give rise, in my mind, to a host of questions that did not come up in our BRS review. And so I don't want to, it really could derail the entire meeting to go through those bullet by bullet, but I feel a need to try to get some of the meat behind the bullets there, and I just wanted to raise that. I don't want to, as I said, I want to, my first question is, do you really believe that the BRS that was published in August covers all of the items that are listed there? Because in my mind, you've enriched your picture of what's going to be necessary for hybrid resource modeling a lot, and I see things in there that I don't know what the actual meaning of them is. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I think there's a lot there in those slides, and it would be helpful. Whether you do another BRS, I feel a need to be able to go through those slides which you presented as part of this meeting, in a lot of detail. And I just don't want to do it at this point because it would probably take an hour, but I believe there's a lot there.
Okay, so that is really great feedback. Thank you, Alba. So when we went and when we split hybrid resources 2A and 2B, we did publish the BRS, the revision of the BRS at that point, and then our team also went and updated the RUG and these slides at that time. But I think that you're right, is it would not hurt to just confirm that there's nothing in the queue and that we have all of the detail that's here also in the BRS that aligns, and then we're happy to set up a further discussion or ask our SMEs to come to a future RUG to cover those as well. So I'll talk to the project team and see what the best way is to present that information, as well as to have them confirm 2 things. One is that we don't expect any revisions to the BRS for 2B, and then secondly, that what we have in the slides here is still accurate and aligns with what we have published.
Okay, so that's great. So you're basically saying these slides are exactly what was already available in August, and there haven't been any changes since. So it's on me to understand what you've already produced. Because I when I looked at those bullets, I had a number of questions, and perhaps we haven't looked carefully enough at the BRS to see how some of these things are going to be done.
Yeah, no, and I will double check on my side too, but yeah, my understanding is that that content there was revised when we updated the external BRS to split the 2A and 2B. So I don't think that there's anything new. I'm not aware of any additional changes that were made to those, but if you have more specific questions, please, as always, send that to us to start the discussion now and get our SMEs involved now to be better prepared for that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Al. All right, great. Okay, any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat or the queue. Okay, so let's move on.
Actually, I do see a couple more in the queue. I see a question from who's next. It's okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just had it refreshed. Please go ahead.
Hi, Trian. This is Elena here from PG&E. So I would like to continue with Alva's question. So hybrid resources phase 2A and 2B BRS is published like months ago. So I did ask a question to Robert Hess, who is the PMO for hybrid, and he did confirm with the business SMEs, and I believe the revised version of BRS is coming by end of this December. So it would be really helpful if you do talk to the project team and get it confirmed.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. And I'm sorry, Alva and Elena, for the confusion on that, but I'll make sure that we reconcile that with the project team. And then again, since I'm keeping the RUG on the 14th, I will have a better update there, as well as if you have any emails or cities to the team, we'll make sure that those are updated properly as well.
Trying, if I could intervene here, this is Adrian. Alina, I think this change in BRS, I think that Bob may have mentioned, is the fact that we had some features for waste enhancements that were originally in the 2B phase. We tried really hard to pull them into 2A, and then later we decided that actually they need too much effort and testing to be done in 2A. So we're reverting those BRSs or requirements into 2B, and probably that's why he's mentioning this revised BRS. Overall, the scope of the project has not changed for a long time. So I think if you are interested to say if the scope of the project has evolved and you added something, the answer is no. I think it's about what we're trying to complete this year versus next year. I think that will be the difference.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for the information.
All right. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Melina and Alba. Are there any other questions on spring or hybrid as well? Okay. So I think that we can also just adjust our materials to reflect more clearly what the expectations are for the BRS there, and have that tracked in the rug, reflecting what Adrian had mentioned, as well as any questions from PG&E that we can clarify. Okay, so let's move on to fall release. We'll go on to the next slide. Well, actually, I won't, maybe won't go into detail for the fall. I think because there's no changes here, what you'll see in the release summary is the plan scope that is tentative, and for the fall release, what we plan to have in the next rug is the overall timeline and expectations of deliverables leading up to the fall activation that's currently planned for October 1st, and we'll add the matrix in there for those released deliverables and timelines coming up by project, and plan that for the next rug. But I don't have any additional changes to report here in fall 2022, so I'd like to just open this up for questions now. I see Dan Dan's hand is raised. Dan, please go ahead.
Hi, Trang. Thank you. Dan from Customized Energy Solutions. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. I just got the beep down from my iPhone buds. So the question that I had is more of a request going forward on the FRP Phase 2 implementation for next fall. And that's just to note that the dependencies on this initiative's implementation that are likely to exist in the day-ahead market enhancements, and a request that there be updates that just talk about the feasibility of the implementation timeline, sort of how the technology aspect of that is going, and the performance and such of the testing, so that from a policy perspective in the day-ahead market enhancements, maybe even in EDAM, that we're well aware of how that's rolling out, so that kind of know what assumptions to make when it comes to the nodal deliverability aspects around that may be extended to DAME or EDAM. So that's one aspect of it. The other is that there's been some discussion going back to a DMM report, also to I think we had this discussion in previous MPPF around a change that was made back in May of 2021 that allowed wind and solar resources to be awarded flexible ramping product. And just haven't had any follow-up discussion on that. And so I'm hoping maybe in the discussion of the FRP Phase 2 that when it gets to talking about the nodal aspect of it, that maybe some more discussion of which resources are qualifying for being awarded FRP, that gets some more kind of policy and implementation level discussion as well.
Okay. So thank you, Dan, for that really detailed comment here. So what I have that queued up and some work for us to go back and provide is, as we continue to provide updates on FRP,
we wanted to track on there and also tie in any updates that we can for the feasibility of implementation timelines and performance in order to provide inputs into any discussions or assumptions or expectations for DAM and EDAM, right? So we wanted to tie in those dependencies, as well as the second item is for the wind and solar implementation that was already passed. We wanted to have a further discussion on which resources from that would be eligible for FRP Phase 2. Is that right?
Yes, and just noting that back when we went through the policy aspect of FRP Phase 2, that I don't remember there being a discussion of wind and solar resources providing FRP. I guess more the discussion was that they would be the driver for the procurement targets.
Okay.
Have specific nodes.
Okay, that sounds good. So I have that queued up, and I may reach out to you just to make sure that I fully understand this as I write it out, and then we'll work with the team on how we can incorporate those updates on a regular basis as we get further into the implementation planning of FRP. That sounds good.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Dan. All right, and I see Alan. Are you there?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. Just a really quick question. Did I hear correctly before that you said that you're planning on canceling one of the upcoming release user group meetings?
Yeah, so we had talked about planning, canceling the 14th because of the MPPF being so close, but I've decided that we will just keep the 14th MPPF and cancel the 28th. And we can evaluate that on the 14th and see if we still want to hold the one on the 28th. So at this point, none have been canceled yet, and we are confirming that we'll keep the RUG on Tuesday.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Glad we can hear. All right. Any other questions or comments on fall? All right. And I believe we can move forward to CRR then, Jimmy. All right, let's go forward. And then one more, please. All right, thanks. So for CRR, this is actually a system upgrade, and we do plan that for an independent implementation in 2023. And a lot of the focus and activity is happening on the technical side in the technical user group right now. So I wanted to just give a brief update on what we're doing there. As for the integration for the API for CRR, we are implementing a new pattern, and we're working with the technical teams via the B2B Improvements webinar series to kind of further define that to make sure that it meets everyone's needs. So we had that first discussed for CRR API on the B2B improvement session on November 3rd, and the next one is planned for February 3rd. And the outcome of those discussions is published on the developer site. So any users who are interested in what has currently been discussed and defined can refer to the dev site itself, and anyone who's interested in attending the discussions, the technical discussions on the CR API should let Indu know, and then she will invite you to the next technical sessions, especially the one on February 3rd, where CRR will be covered again. And then if we go to one more slide, we can give a reminder of the timeline, Jimmy. Okay. So for CRR upgrade, you can see that just at a high level, what we are planning is a market sim in February of 2023. And we'll have a parallel operations period in March of 2023, and then that'll lead into the activation or the go live for the production upgrade, and then April 20th is planned right now. And this is going to be available for reference, and we'll provide more information in the normal format of the additional deliverables as we get closer. But this is going to be a significant effort, and so we wanted to get this information out earlier for the overall timeline and for the technical discussion and feedback opportunity on the API design as well. Are there any questions on CRR? Okay, and I believe that takes us to the end of our presentation on the release plan. So I'll open it up. First, I wanted to thank everyone for their questions and comments, and then open it up one more time for any release plan questions or comments. All right. I'm hearing none. So, so for those of you that are attending the RUG next Tuesday, I will talk to you then. And if you have additional items that you would like me to queue up or cover, then please do send me an email. Okay. Thanks, Jimmy. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Trang. I do see Brad's name in the queue, although I'm not sure if he's ready yet. Brad, if you're there in audio, let us know. Otherwise, we'll provide a few more minutes, perhaps, for folks to ask questions about maybe release planning for Trang or anything maybe Guillermo can answer, as I think Amber's left. So.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Brad. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, we can.
Okay, so we're ready to go?
Yes, we are ready to go, but yeah, take your time, of course. We are making good time for the call, so let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. Okay, yeah, sorry, everybody. I was just jumping off another call. So, yeah, this is Brad Cooper. I'm going to give the policy update. You moved to the first slide. You know, in this presentation, we go over our current initiatives, just the scope of the initiative, a very high level, the status of the initiative, and then we also review the EIM governing bodies' role in approving the initiative, because people have been interested in that because of our governance model, where we have both the CalISO board and the EIM governing body, and it gets kind of confusing and hard to track who has what approval role in the various initiatives. So we summarize that in this initiative so people have visibility to that. And usually we provide the so you can go to the first slide. Usually we start off the slide with the roadmap, because during the year, I should say the roadmap of our policy initiatives, or high-level schedule of all the initiatives and the planned initiatives. I'm not going to do that this time because we just posted our draft policy roadmap for next year and the following years, and received comments on that, and then we're going to be looking at the comments, and I believe we're having another call to go over that. But since that's active, I'm not going to go over that now. We will, though, as 2022 goes on and things change, we'll be presenting that roadmap and describing the changes in this presentation. Okay, so the first initiative we have, and these are in order at least roughly of when items are going to the EIM governing body and or the CalISO board, which we have to do before then the filing any proposed tariff changes with FERC. So the first initiative is the Transmission Services and Market Scheduling Priorities Initiative. This is the initiative formerly known as External Load Forward Scheduling Rights. Changed the name because people didn't like the name. The scope of this is to consider a process for wheeling transactions that are going through the ISO to obtain high priority scheduling rights, which would be replacing an interim process that we proposed and FERC approved prior to last summer. And it's also looking at enhancements to the process for exporting high priority exports from non-resource adequacy roles. The EIM governing body's role in this is an advisory role. Advisory role means we present the proposal to the EIM governing body. They don't have a formal role in approving it, though they do provide input to the EIM board when we present it to the board. Looks like I lied on this initiative. It says the phase 1 draft final proposal was posted on December 8th. That wasn't posted yesterday. I believe it's going to be posted tomorrow. What we're proposing to do is to set up a special EIM governing body and a CalISO board meeting in January. The reason for doing that is we're going to be proposing our phase 1 proposal, which is pretty much just to extend the interim proposal that FERC, or the interim rules that FERC approved last June. The idea that the special meeting is so we can get that filed as soon as possible to provide certainty to all the participants to what the rules will be for wheeling priority for this upcoming next summer and the following summer. And then we're going to continue to work on phase 2, which is looking at the long-term process for external entities to get scheduling rights for wheeling transactions. And we're targeting completing that mid-year, this upcoming year, 2022. Next slide. Resource efficiency evaluation enhancements. Phase 1, it has been developing further enhancements to the EIM's resource efficiency evaluation. It's also looking at examining modifications to the consequence for resource efficiency evaluation failure. Actually, I should have made an edit to this slide because the consequences for the resource efficiency evaluation failure has actually been moved to phase 2 of this initiative, which we will be starting later next year, although in the extended day-ahead market, or EDAM, stakeholder discussions, we're going to be discussing failure we'll be discussing consequences for failure of the resource efficiency evaluation in EDAM, starting up real soon, which may end up applying to the real-time EIM. EIM governing body would have a joint authority with the CalISO board for approving these changes. We're posting a revised draft final proposal on December 16th or thereabouts. That's our plan date, but we may deviate a little bit from there. And we're planning to take this to the February 2022. Looks like I got a typo in there with 2 2022s. joint EIM governing body and ISO board meeting. Next slide. This central procurement entity implementation initiative, this is a fairly limited scope. This is developing enhancements to accommodate the California Public Utility Commission's central buyer of resource adequacy resources. There are some items that the ISO needs to do to implement that, although I believe it is also looking at a tweak to the RA availability incentive mechanism, otherwise known as RAIM. This would be CalISO board only as it applies to California's RA program. We're planning to post the draft final proposal on that as a Christmas present on December 22nd, though I do believe they've allowed an extended comment time as to not mess up people's holidays. And our plan is to present that to the CalISO board in their March board meeting. Next slide. The Interconnection Process Enhancements Initiative, otherwise known as EIP. It's enhancing our generator interconnection and deliverability allocation procedures. It's being run in two phases. The first phase is addressing enhancements to address the overload in our interconnection queue. That phase is being expedited, so those changes can be put in place as soon as possible to address the current overload, though the changes will apply to future interconnection queues. And then it's looking at broader interconnection and deliverability and allocation procedure changes to better align our processes and rules with the load-serving entities' procurement processes. The issue paper stock proposal hopefully is posted on December 6th. And then, like I said, we're breaking this into two phases. The first phase will go to the May board meeting, with the second phase targeted for the November board meeting. Next slide, please. The Reliability Demand Response Resource Bidding Enhancements, otherwise known as RDRR bidding enhancements, it is looking at, like the title says, various enhancements to RDRR bidding. The first is aligning with FERC order number 831, which order 831 raises our price cap to $2,000 under, not our price cap, I'm sorry, our energy bid cap to $2,000 under certain circumstances. The current RDRR rules require RDRR to bid at least $950 or 95% of the bid cap. So we're looking at rules to align that with when the bid cap is $2,000. Is looking at minimum load costs, or I should say other potential changes to address a anomaly in RDRR dispatch, where they can be dispatched to zero minimum loads, which causes problems for the RDRR resource response. And then also looking at a potential change to what's called the discrete option for RDRR bidding. There's a cap on the maximum size of the resources, and this is looking at potentially changing that. This is under a joint authority of the EIM governing body and the CalISO board. which may seem odd at first glance because RDRR is involves a settlement with the CPUC and the utilities and the ISO. In other words, it's pretty much a California thing, but conceivably other BAAs in the EIM could elect to have resources, in conjunction with their regulators, could elect to have resources that are similar to RDRR, and there's no reason they couldn't use the same functionality, so it would be under joint authority, though none do currently. The revised straw proposal is to be posted December 14th, and we're targeting the May joint meeting with the EIM governing body and the board. Next slide, please. The Energy Storage Enhancements Initiative is developing enhancements to the rules and the model for storage resources. Like I said, it's looking at improvements to the existing storage model that we use in our market, and these include provisions for modeling the state of charge of storage resources. And it's also looking at exceptional dispatch provisions for storage resources to ensure reliability. In other words, when the operators need to issue exceptional dispatches for storage to assure reliability, and then also some enhancements to the co-located resource model, and I believe also to the pseudo-tied resource rules. This says joint authority with the EIM governing body role. Actually, we've been looking at that. We've been taking one last look at that before we publish the paper, which this says it's scheduled December 8th. It's not posted yet. Hopefully, it will be posted today. The holdup was we were reviewing that again, and it turns out that there's parts of that are joint authority, and then other parts of that would be advisory role for the EIM governing body. In any case, our plan is to complete this initiative mid-2022 when we would bring it to the board and the EIM governing body. Next slide, please. Yes, the day-ahead market enhancements, it's looking at adding what we term the imbalanced reserve product, which would be co-optimized in the integrated forward market along with demand, and I guess I should have said ancillary services. The intent of that is to take capacity ISO operators are reserving through RUC adjustments, residual unit commitment process adjustments, or load forecast adjustments, or also known as biasing or conforming, and move those into a market product. I should also note that this is a needed, or maybe I should say likely needed precursor to the EDAM, the imbalanced reserve product. We think it will play a critical role in EDAM. And then we're also looking at residual unit commitment process improvements, which is mainly adding downward capacity awards or schedules to the residual unit commitment process. EIM governing body would have an advisory role in approving this initiative. This says stakeholder workshop on December 15th. We since discovered there's a significant CPUC workshop on the same day, so we're looking at moving that. it's going to likely end up being early January. Hopefully we can fit it in between our EDAM working groups. After that, we'll likely plan additional workshops rather than, and potentially, depending on how things go, issue a second revised straw proposal. But we would like to work out the various issues with stakeholders in workshops before we spend time putting out another paper on that. And as part of those workshops, at the MSC meeting, we talked about how we're working on some more data analysis to demonstrate the benefits of imbalanced reserves as well as their impacts. Presenting that analysis would also be part of these workshops. Last year we were talking about implementing this in 2022. We've since moved that to put the functionality in place at the same time we put the EDAM market functionality in place, which would be in fall 2023. So we have some more time on this. So we're targeting mid-2022 EIM governing body and CalISO board meetings. We'll see how that goes. It has a relationship with EDAM. EDAM's not targeted to be done till the end of the year. So depending, we would either take it for approval in mid-2022, or if there's still some outstanding issues that need to wait to see what the final EDAM design is, potentially we would take it later. But there is a very close relationship between day-ahead market enhancements and EDAM. And then I should also have said also between the RA enhancements initiative, we're also coordinating that with the schedule of day-ahead market enhancements and EDAM, because if they're interrelated, because day-ahead market enhancements would change or would potentially change the real-time must-offer requirements for RA resources, as well as whether they bid zero or not for capacity products, which has a close relationship with day-ahead market enhancements and EDAM. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Here it is right here. Yeah, so like I just said, resource adequacy enhancements is looking at in alignment with the day-ahead market enhancements. Like I said, bid price and must-offer changes. There might be changes related to flexible resource capacity. It's also looking at unrelated changes which involve modifications to the bid insertion rules for storage and conditionally available resources. But like I said, we're trying to sync this up with EDAM. The tentative plan is to post a revised straw proposal in February, depending on the progress we make in EDAM. And then we put here Q3 2022. So if DAME went mid 2022 to the EIM governing body, excuse me, to the EIM governing body and to the board mid 2022, then we would bring this later after that's finalized. As far as the EIM governing body role, some of this would potentially be advisory under the new governance guidelines, because it affects the real-time market in general. Next slide, please. And I think this might be the last slide. So I'm sure everybody is well aware we're restarting the extended day-ahead market, looking at extending the day-ahead market to EIM entities. we're starting off what we call a working group process, where we're going to have some intense stakeholder involvement to develop the initial straw proposal, at least, and the working groups could well continue past the initial straw proposal. We've broken up those working groups into the 3 scope items listed here: supply commitment, resource efficiency, transmission commitment, congestion rate allocation, and then greenhouse gas accounting and costs. We're looking at a December 16th meeting next week to kick off that working group process. That meeting is going to go over the scope and the working group process. And like I said, we're completing that by the end of the 22. And the EIM governing body role here, we listed it as we have not yet proposed a decisional designation. And we think that's appropriate at this point, given that we're trying to start off the EIM from a blank slate. We don't want to presume what the design and the governing body or the governance designation would be. I think so. I think this is the last slide, unless I'm wrong, Jimmy. I can take some questions.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, we have a couple questions in the queue, at least a few to see. I think Michelle was the first.
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Michelle. Michelle, your line's unmuted. You may go ahead.
Hey, Brad, this is Michelle Keto from the CPUC. Just a few questions. On the, if you go back to page 56, what used to be the wheeling initiative, if it's posted the 10th, are you going to be having another meeting, and when would comments be due? Just trying to work out my schedule.
I don't believe, I take that back. Yes, I believe we're having a meeting, and we'll be having a meeting and then taking comments. I don't have that schedule right in front of me. I believe the meeting. I believe the meeting is. Well, the meeting's probably like next week, and comments would be in a couple weeks after that, or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact schedule.
That's fine. Just a couple other questions. Yesterday, we were talking about this idea that exports are potentially being supported by EIM advisory imports. And then, you know, that needs to be figured out for resource efficiency, but it also seems, I believe PowerX raised an issue about maybe those become lower priority exports. Where will that be discussed?
That would likely be discussed in phase. You know, that's a good question, Michelle. Why don't you submit that in your comments, and maybe we can. You know, phase 2 is focused on the long-term process to establish how many scheduling rights we could release, and then the process to release the scheduling rights. But maybe that issue wouldn't have to wait. That's a much longer time frame. If you could submit that in your comments, and we can think about that.
My comments on RSC or sorry.
Either or both. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, that's kind of a interaction that's just kind of come up, and I'm not recalling for sure if we thought about a home for that issue. I don't believe we have.
Okay. A couple of other questions. I don't see on this list the whole idea of system market power mitigation, fast start pricing that was going to be at the same time as EIM?
Yeah. Yeah, so I didn't include upcoming initiatives. I had so many slides. So we still have the price formation initiative scheduled to start off mid-year, which the scope of that's going to include scarcity pricing, fast start pricing. I should mention it also relates to the storage initiatives, because we will likely look at some of the ideas that were discussed at the MSC meeting on multi-interval optimization, like its weighting advisory intervals, advisory market intervals differently. We'll be discussing that initiative. And then also system market power mitigation, although in EDAM, we are also going to be addressing system market power mitigation. And we had a proposal that we discussed briefly during the last system market power mitigation stakeholder initiative. I think we may have just discussed it at an MSC meeting, and then we walked it back. I believe the reason was it couldn't have been implemented in time for the time frame we were thinking when we were on the system market power mitigation. But anyway, if it's a proposal to assess system market power based on groups of BAAs, which would be the much more robust and accurate measure of system market power than the mechanism we were proposing, looking at the CalISO BAA in the last system market power initiative. So if that is developed and implemented for EDAM, and we think it probably is something we need to do for EDAM, it seems likely we could also put that into the real-time market, and it would supersede, so to speak, the previous design we were looking at. But the idea was that we would still reserve a place in price formation initiative to look at system market power, to the extent that there were things that still needed to be talked about that weren't addressed in the EDAM methodology.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing is that might start in mid-year, but I do have a comment about that. I mean, is it possible that we could also put intertide deviation into that? Because it seems to me that the incentives that you create when you do pricing, it's going to affect, it sort of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday. So if you're going to charge load, fast start pricing, or, anyway, it's scarcity pricing. If you're going to charge scarcity pricing, it seems like the corollary is that you also charge folks that don't show up that we're counting on, potentially if you're counting on them for exports. So to me, it seems really important to tie in their intertide deviation to make sure that the incentives are all aligned. So we're not sort of just missing one piece of this. So I would just add that point.
Yeah, well, the scarcity pricing applies to real-time deviations of supply too. It's, in my mind, it's a very strong incentive for supply to. You're talking about meeting.
Right. But if imports show up only in half and then they don't show up in real time, intertide deviation is what's imposed upon them, not the day-ahead price, right? So that's why it's so important to add that element in to this discussion, I would think. Critical, in fact.
Okay, well, we can talk about that as the scope when we get to the price formation.
Okay, and then my other question is, I guess this is sort of going forward as well, EDAM, the timing for EDAM governance, I mean, it all seems related to all the things that we're talking about here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, would that be another mid-2022 initiative, similar to what we had for the EIM GRC?
Yeah, I believe, I think we presented a slide on that at the EDM kickoff meeting. Yeah, I believe the EIM governance activities are going on in parallel in 2022, if I'm remembering right.
Okay, so something should be kicked off at the beginning. I mean, it's not in parallel with the EDM workshops right now, right?
Yeah, I haven't really included I know the EIM governance is a stakeholder process, but that's a whole different group in the ISO than the policy and the infrastructure people. I'm not recalling the exact timeline of that. I think we had a slide on that though for the EDM kickoff meeting.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. Thanks so much. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We are moving to the next question in the queue. Alva, your line is unmuted. You may go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me, Brad?
Yeah.
Great. I had a couple questions on RDRR and then on the storage. So on RDRR, could you, since the timing of the proposal is still like a week away, can you give a sense of what the CAISO thinking is right now on the FERC 831? Is it going to be requiring bids to be resubmitted, allowing bids to be resubmitted, or ISO calculating new bids? Those are the three options, and I'm just.
I believe what we're likely to propose is we would automatically increase the bids.
Okay.
You know,
right.
if we raise the bid cap to 2,000, you know, we would do something like double the existing bid. So, you know, the 950 bids would become $1,900.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for providing that information. We'll look forward to looking at that more carefully. But it would imply that we would not need to be concerned at this point about having to resubmit bids on a punitive timeline. So that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
On the energy storage enhancements, I just had one point of curiosity, which is the involvement of EIM. I think it depends on the scope of how you scope the initiative, because as I understand it, there is no storage modeling for NGR resources in the EIM. There's no ability to track storage, because that's essentially, you have to start from a day-ahead model in order to have SOC being tracked in the actual model of the resource. So I just wanted to raise that point, because in my mind, unless there, you know, this is getting completely bound up in the EDM, it would seem to me that the nearer term changes should not involve storage, should not involve any element of storage management for EIM participants.
That's an interesting point. As far as my understanding, we came to the conclusion that the storage model is available to EIM participants. I don't know that anyone's contemplated that there's an interaction with day-ahead market schedules, but I'll bring that back, and you may have a point. We can think about that. In any case, in any case, we're putting in a discussion of our thinking in that paper, and this is just the straw proposal. So, you know, that's why we get it in the straw proposal, so people can point out where we have it wrong. And so, if you would submit that comment.
Yeah, great. And I'm looking forward to seeing that later today. So, appreciate that you're putting it out on this accelerated timeline. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. And we're now moving to what I can see is the final question in queue. Looks like Chun Yu. I hope I'm not butchering your name. Your line is unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Brett. On the last slide on the EDAM, can you go to the last slide? I just need some clarifications there. So under the status, there is it says targeting completion by end of 2022. So I come from implementation world. So I would like to know is that you would like to implement this project at the end of 2022, or is the completion of the stakeholder process or the policy?
Yeah, the stakeholder process.
All right, so that is the same thing applied to all the languages across under different initiatives, right? When I say a completion, it really means the stakeholder process.
Right, right. I'm referring to the stakeholder process, not the implementation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. I do not see any additional questions in queue.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Brad, as always. Great questions, folks. And that does bring us to the end of this session, the last MPPF session for the year. So we do wish everyone a happy holidays until the next session is noticed. You can look for the 2022 series to be noticed formally. I expect perhaps in January or February once we align the dates for that. And any topics that you feel need to be addressed or encouraged for us to address, we ask that you please submit them through our city interface, or you can email the ISO Stakeholder Affairs at CAISO.com mailbox as well. And just for an FYI, here are just additional ways to participate. There's the release planning page right there where you can find all the information that Trang went over in further detail. And the various meetings that we address these, we're always getting feedback to hopefully streamline everything as best we can for everybody. So we make everything hopefully easy to access and easy to find for all this material. And on the calendar as well, there's the meetings to look out for. And as mentioned, this was recorded, so you can look out for the MP4 recording to be available the next couple of business days. And with that, thanks again, folks, for your attendance, and please have a great rest of your afternoon.